I always forget that there are more than just the 6 stars you can see in the Los Angeles sky.
Yeah, that's cool too, but I meant this building. It's a giant dome. Domes are so cool.
I prefer rectangular buildings, as I firmly established.
I want to be an architect.
Be it horse, cat, human, or even lizard, our lives are but the briefest flashes in a universe that is billions of years old.
See, Sarah Lynn? We're not doomed. In the great grand scheme of things, we're just tiny specks that will one day be forgotten. So it doesn't matter what we did in the past or how we'll be remembered. The only thing that matters is right now. This moment. This one spectacular moment we are sharing together. Right, Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn? Sarah Lynn?
Bojack Horseman is a hard show to recommend to people. Don't get me wrong, the show is brilliant in every way, but there are so many topics that the show tackles that it kind of feels like a lot. In case you don't know, Bojack Horseman follows the retired late 90s TV star Bojack Horseman as he goes through LA getting into all kinds of trouble. The show is a satire of 90s sitcoms and the Hollywood industry as a whole, borrowing similar elements while poking fun at the same time. The show often doesn't take itself seriously, but when it does, you feel it. The long pauses, the monologues, the awkward moments, you feel that tension, and that's what makes the show great. And no other moment illustrates this better than Sarah Lynn's death. Just one moment from one episode spoke volumes, not only on the show's characters and themes, but more so as a reflection of life. And I'll talk about the meaning of what I just said in a second, but first, in order to understand the weight of this scene, we're going to have to go back all the way to the beginning.
And how about Sarah Lynn as Sabrina? Isn't she wonderful?
Oh, thank you.
Sarah Lynn. You remember that name.
Being the main character of his own show, Bojack Horseman is incredibly flawed. Compared to other main characters from a variety of sitcoms, Bojack shares none of the positive traits that you typically expect. He's selfish, narcissistic, self-destructive, and everything in between. Usually, these traits lead to one-dimensional characters, but with Bojack Horseman, things are different. Horsing around with Bojack's big break into Hollywood. Being the stereotypical 90s sitcom, this show actually does a lot for Bojack's development as a character. 90s TV star Bojack is practically a different person from the Bojack we see today. For what it's worth, back then, Bojack and many others believed he was a hero. Many people looked up to Bojack, and no episode illustrates this better than The Telescope.
All right, stop. Oh. You're nervous. Forget the script.
Okay.
We're gonna do that movie that you're always making me watch. You know, you have to answer for the chimpanzee, Tino.
No, Mickey, you got it all wrong. Hey, are you scared at all? That if the show takes off, everything's going to change?
No, I'm not scared, BJ. The future is bright. Just look at it.
Before Bojack ever became famous, Herb Kazaz was the perfect man. He's the type of guy where you look at him and you think he's the main character. He had dreams, goals that made him stand out from everyone else. He was funny and charismatic, but most importantly, he had Bojack. The two were very close friends, and when the time came for Herb to fulfill his dreams, he wanted Bojack to be there with him, every step of the way.
Look out at that city. What do you see?
Wow, I didn't realize there were so many day hookers.
I see a city that you and I will run someday. And when we're both famous and have everything we've ever wanted, we'll come back here together and high five.
This dream would later become horsing around. To Herb, Bojack wasn't just a comedian or some one-off sitcom actor. He was his friend, his hero. But the future didn't look too bright.
Police say Mr. Kazaz was caught in the middle of lewd acts with another man.
I know we haven't been close for the past couple years, but you know me, right? You know that I'm a good guy. They're gunning for me at the network. And if I get kicked off this, I won't recover. I need to know that you've got my back. You know I wouldn't ask if I didn't need it. Come on, Bojack. How'd we get so far apart, huh?
Bojack. Can we chat for a second? Bojack, I think you're a star. And sometimes being a star means making tough choices. You can storm out, make a big show out of what a good friend you are, or you could be the guy who does his job.
Angela.
I'll tell you when it's your turn to talk again, look. You're a star. But this is really just the beginning of the Bojack Horseman story. You can choose whatever path you want, but I'll tell you right now, you don't win awards, and you don't get to be on the covers of magazines, and you don't get to play the lead role in the Secretariat movie by being a good friend.
Bojack is not the hero of this story. He's the villain. So that brings us back to modern day. Knowing how little time he has left, Bojack tried to do the right thing. He tried to let go of those years and find closure with Herb before he passes. And this moment means a lot to Bojack. Throughout the show so far, we never actually see Bojack grow as a character. He never attempts to right his wrongs or fix the mistakes he's made, always leaving a negative impact on the people around him. So to see him go out of his way to make things right shows a more optimistic side to Bojack, that maybe he isn't such a bad guy. That maybe all he ever wanted was to do the right thing, to prove to himself that he's not a terrible person, that maybe he's not the villain after all. But I think it's important to look at this from all angles. Yes, Bojack is trying to do the right thing, but to Herb, Bojack is still the villain, and villains don't deserve closure or happy endings.
Oh, you should get that looked at.
Yeah, I've been meaning to see a doctor.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you about, I feel bad about what happened.
So, you're apologizing?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't forgive you.
Herb, I said I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I do not forgive you.
Not sure you get what's happening here. This could be the last time that
No, I'm not gonna give you closure. You don't get that. You have to live with the shitty thing you did for the rest of your life. You have to know that it's never, ever going to be okay.
Now, I'd like to ask you a pretty personal question. Has there ever been a point in your life where you reached rock bottom? With that being said, all of us have different rock bottoms, that low point in our lives where we didn't feel like ourselves. But for Bojack, it seems as though he's been at rock bottom his whole life. For a lot of people, it's easy to get caught up in some sort of fantasy that maybe if I do this, I'll finally become happy, or if I get this, all my dreams will come true. In psychology, this is called conditional happiness, and it happens to everyone. We all make a checklist in our heads of things we want to accomplish, thinking that if we reach these goals, we'll finally be complete. But sadly, that's never the case. Every time we complete a task on our list, we always look at the next best thing. Sure, you feel good about yourself for a while, but that eventually fades away and you're back at square one. Or at least in the show's terms, back at rock bottom. It seems as if throughout Bojack's life, he can only find happiness momentarily. It doesn't stick with him, rather slowly fading away until the next big thing comes to change his life. But this behavior is toxic. The show makes that very clear. Every time Bojack tried to hold on to that feeling of self-worth, he always ends up hurting someone else in the process. For a more relevant example, think of Sarah Lynn. I haven't been mentioning Sarah Lynn a whole lot because she brings out the worst in Bojack. To give context, Sarah Lynn was a co-star on Horsing Around, right next to Bojack. Being the youngest out of the three children, she saw him as a role model, wishing to be just like him when she grows up. Fast forward 30 years later, and that's exactly what happens. We don't get introduced to Sarah Lynn until episode 3, titled Prickly Muffin, where we see a portrait of a woman broken beyond belief. Just like how Bojack's life changed for the worst after Horsing Around, Sarah Lynn's life has only gotten downhill, with problems ranging from severe substance abuse to self-harm. typically in a sitcom with these types of characters, you see them grow throughout the course of an episode or a season. They slowly realize that what they're doing to themselves and the people around them is harmful and toxic. They learn the errors of their ways and therefore are able to move on as people. But Sarah Lynn is different. The episode revolves around Bojack letting Sarah Lynn stay at his place, thinking that he's helping an old friend, but in reality, what ensues are a lot of drugs, parties, and well, that. You'd think that by the end of the episode, Sarah Lynn would learn an important lesson about life and how your actions have consequences, but she doesn't. By the end of the episode, she exits Bojack's doors the same way she entered, a broken portrait. And the same goes for Bojack. In the beginning, he didn't take Sarah Lynn in because he felt bad for her or because he had good intentions. He did it for his own selfish reasons. To him, Sarah Lynn was more of an escape, whether it was from his own loneliness or himself. All Bojack did during their time together was enable the worst in each other. And that says a lot about Bojack and how he treats the people in his life. No matter how much Bojack tries to do the right thing, he always ends up hurting someone. And that's hard to stomach. Throughout this show, we constantly see Bojack struggle with himself, fighting with who he wants to be versus who he really is. And his struggle plays an important part to his character. Bojack wants to believe that he's a good guy, and this belief is what sets up episode 11, titled Downer Ending. Remember conditional happiness, that concept that we talked about earlier? Well, I want that to stay in your mind as I explain this next part, because it's pretty important. Bojack's main goal throughout season 1 is to publish a book, a memoir about his life that gives the public insight into the real Bojack. The only problem is, he can't write. And this is where we get introduced to Diane, Bojack's ghostwriter. Diane is an interesting character. She seems to play an important role in Bojack's life. She acts as the voice of reason to Bojack. She provides him comfort, whereas he typically doesn't seem comfortable. She always listens to Bojack's stories, listening to every little detail about his life, and is the only person Bojack can trust to go see Herb. And when things go south, she's the only person Bojack can rely on. During season 1, Diane is the only person that gets to see the real Bojack, and after seeing him at his lowest point, she decides to write about the real Bojack, warts and all. Eventually the book gets published and everyone loves it. Everyone except Bojack. Instead of seeing this as a success, he views the book as a mockery of his character, depicting him as a weak, fragile man, when in reality that's just who he is. But Bojack can't admit that to himself. So instead of being satisfied, he fires Diane and tries to write his story the way he wants it to be told. It's funny because Bojack finally gets everything that he wants, but still isn't happy. And this is where Sarah Lynn comes in. The time where Bojack is the most emotionally vulnerable, Sarah Lynn is the only person that enables Bojack's tendencies. And after a long night of drugs, we catch up with Bojack in an alternate world. A world in which he has a wife and kid. A world where it's quiet and peaceful. A world in which Bojack is actually happy. Who knows the life Bojack could have if he never became an actor? Maybe there's a small chance that Bojack doesn't end up the way he is. But we'll never know. The episode ends with Bojack waking up all alone. And in a moment of desperation, he goes to the person that knows him best and asks her one question.
I guess my question is, do you think it's too late for me?
What?
I mean, am I just doomed to be the person that I am? The person in that book? I mean, it's not too late for me, is it? It's not too late. Diane, I need you to tell me that it's not too late.
Bojack,
I need you to tell me that I'm a good person. I know that I can be selfish and narcissistic and self-destructive, but underneath all that, deep down, I'm a good person, and I need you to tell me that I'm good. Diane, tell me, please, Diane, tell me that I'm good.
After everything Bojack has done, he finally realizes that he's the villain, that he's everything wrong in his life. It's not the people around him, it's not the drugs, it's not his past, it's him. It's always been him. It's hard to know that, but it's true. Bojack Horseman is an example of a broken portrait, someone who can't be fixed no matter how hard they try. And even though deep down, Bojack isn't a bad person, he doesn't have anything to show for it. This can be seen throughout both season 2 and 3 as Bojack steadily gets worse over time. But I like to move past Bojack for a minute and focus on something less depressing. By any chance, do any of you remember the real-life sitcom, That 70s Show? It was a show about teenagers living in the 70s while it aired during the 90s. It was a weird premise for a show, but it was a smash hit, going on to break records and last 8 seasons with a spin-off. The reason why I mention this is because in the show, there was this character named Lori Foreman, this boss girl who was willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants. Well, she was played by Lisa Robin Kelly, up until season 5, when all of a sudden she was written out and replaced with this new actress, and fans didn't really know why she was recasted until 2010 when Lisa was arrested and charged with a DUI. And all of a sudden, it starts to click. She wasn't removed from the show because of personal problems, she was removed because she had a very serious drug addiction that just got swept under the rug. At the time of her removal, she was going through a miscarriage and all the network did was fire her. And as I did more research, the more cases started pouring in of young child actors growing up to develop substance abuse problems, whether it was the Olsen twins from Full House or Macaulay Culkin from Home Alone. All of these people have suffered from severe drug problems, and the industry that raised them does nothing. The reason why I mention this is because in 2013, Lisa Robin Kelly died shortly after checking into rehab. 3 years later, Bojack Horseman season 3 airs, and Sarah Lynn dies from a drug overdose. Have you ever hit rock bottom? Sure, your rock bottom may be different from others, but we can all agree that at one point, we were at our lowest. Now, I want to ask you a different question. What did you do to get out of rock bottom? Many people do a lot of different things to help better themselves, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you're just stuck with no way out. And even though that's pretty sad to hear, I bring this up for a good reason. Season 3, episode 11, titled That's Too Much Man. Throughout season 3, Sarah Lynn doesn't get a lot of screen time except for this one moment where she announces that she's sober, and that's pretty much it. Instead, the season is focused on Bojack and his attempts at winning an Oscar. At first, the Oscar is set up as this ultimate prize that once Bojack achieves, he'll finally be happy. He has a goal to work towards, a dream that'll make his efforts worth something. And in episode 10, he gets nominated. He actually has a chance to win, a chance to feel proud of himself for once in his life. And yet, he doesn't. He still feels the same despite getting everything he ever wanted. And all he's left with is this feeling of emptiness. So once again, he finds himself at that same place, with no one to comfort him. He tries to distract himself with drugs and parties, but that only ends in disappointment. So he calls the only person who is just like him, the only person that Bojack hasn't hurt, the only person who is also a broken portrait. He calls Sarah Lynn. That brings us back to this moment, this one single moment. But this isn't the last we see of Sarah Lynn. She makes one last appearance after this, and it's during the series' climactic episode, The View from Halfway Down, where we see Bojack at his absolute lowest. Consumed by emotions of grief and guilt, he tries to find a way out. And he does. Trapped in his dream prison, he is drowning. And in this moment, he sees everyone in his life who has moved on. He sees Herb as him and the other guests talk about the importance of life, its highs and lows, whether it has any meaning. Then he sees Sarah Lynn and apologizes that if he could go back, he would have treated her better. But he can't. What he's done to her will always exist. He could never go back. Never. At moments like these, I think back to that dream sequence from Downer ending. That maybe if Bojack chose a different life, he would be happy instead of being stuck. The episode ends with a phone call, and Bojack closes his eyes one more time.
Diane, are you there? Diane, I need you.
Bojack?
Diane, thank God, Diane. Okay, Diane, you're gonna save me, right? I called you and you're coming to get me?
Bojack, why did you call me? I live in Chicago. I can't save you.
You didn't pick up.
Right.
It went to voicemail.
Yeah.
And then I went back in the pool. Is it terrifying?
No, I don't think so. It's the way it is, you know. Everything must come to an end. The drip finally stops.
See you on the other side.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
Bojack, when you get sad, you run straight ahead and you keep running forward no matter what. There are people in your life who are going to try to hold you back, slow you down, but you don't let them. Don't you stop running, and don't you ever look behind you. There's nothing for you behind you. All that exists is what's ahead.
It's too late. What's done is done.
No.
There's nothing I can do, Bojack. I'm not real. None of this is.
So what do I do now?
Bojack, it doesn't matter.
Well, if it doesn't matter, can I stay on the phone with you at least?
Okay.
How was your day?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah. My day was good.
I find it kind of ironic how Bojack drowns in his pool because as he looks down in his final moments, all he sees is himself. And that says a lot. The pool, Sarah Lynn, Lisa Robert Kelly, you, the viewer, it all says a lot. What it exactly means, I can't tell you. After all, it's your life. I can't tell you that.